There are 47 keys on my work ring. I know every one of them by touch, not by the number stamped on the tag, by the weight, the cut, the specific resistance of each one turning in its lock. 4B sticks slightly in winter. 12A needs a half turn left before it catches. The master for the utility corridor has a small notch I filed myself 3 years ago so I'd never confuse it with the laundry room key in the dark. 47 keys, 47 families. Every one of them trusted me with the way into their home. I did not have a key to my own mother's apartment. She lived on the 8th floor, Unit 8C. The apartment was in my name, had been since my father died 11 years ago, since he sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Mara, I'm putting the unit in your name. You're the responsible one. You always have been." I was 25. I didn't understand yet what being the responsible one actually cost. My name on the deed, my mother's name on nothing, and yet somehow over 11 years the apartment had quietly become hers. Hers to redecorate, hers to rearrange, hers to fill with photographs of grandchildren I noticed, eventually did not include my daughter. My name is Mara Calloway. I'm 36 years old. I'm the property manager of the Crestwood Residences in Columbus, Ohio, a 12-story building with 47 occupied units, a parking structure, 2 service elevators, and a building management system. I know better than I know most people. My job is maintenance, not the physical kind, the operational kind, leases, compliance, inspections, tenant disputes, noise complaints, repair requests. Every system in the building runs through my office. Every irregularity surfaces on my desk eventually. The irregularity that changed everything surfaced on a Tuesday morning in March in the form of a formal complaint filed by the Crestwood Homeowners Association. 3 typed pages stapled in the upper left corner, the way formal complaints always are, sitting in my inbox between a water pressure report and a request from Unit 3D about the parking lot alighting. The complaint was about Unit 8C, unauthorized short-term rental activity. Estimated duration, 22 months. Estimated revenue, undisclosed. Unit 8C, my mother's apartment. My name on the deed. I read it twice. Then I set it face down on my desk, and I sat very still for a long time, the way I sit when a building system has just told me something I need to understand before I respond to it. My daughter's name is Lily. She's 9 years old. She has her father's eyes and my father's stubbornness, and she draws small stars in the corners of everything she writes. Homework, birthday cards, grocery lists she makes when she's helping me shop. Everything gets a star. 3 weeks before the complaint landed on my desk, I had asked my mother to sign a single form, 1 page, 2 signature lines, for Lily's scholarship application to a private arts program. The application required a grandparent character reference. Optional, but weighted. My mother had said she didn't have time. She said it on a Thursday. On Friday, I found out she had spent that Thursday afternoon signing documents for my brother Derek's son to enroll in an international study program in Vancouver. She didn't have time for 1 page. She had time for Vancouver. I want you to hold that, because that Thursday is where this story actually begins. Before I tell you what was in the complaint and what I found when I started pulling the building records and what happened at the Crestwood annual homeowners meeting on the last Thursday of April, please subscribe if you haven't already and drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every single one, every week, without exception. My name is Mara Calloway. I manage 47 homes. I couldn't protect my own. Let me tell you what I did about that on that night. Let me take you back before the complaint, before the Tuesday morning, before the 3 stapled pages, before I understood the shape of what had been happening in my own building while I managed everyone else's problems. Let me take you back to the kind of ordinary that turns out not to be ordinary at all. The Crestwood Residences sits on the corner of Broadview and Elm in the north part of Columbus. A 12-story brick building built in 1987, renovated in 2014, the kind of place that attracts young families and retirees in roughly equal measure because it's close to the elementary school and the medical center and the quiet park where people walk dogs in the morning. I have managed it for 7 years. Before me, a man named Harold Voss managed it for 22. When he retired, he handed me his keys. Literally his physical key ring, worn smooth from decades of use, and said, The building will tell you everything you need to know. You just have to listen. I learned to listen. I learned the building's rhythms. Which pipes expand in January, which elevator cable needs tension adjustment in summer, which families fight on Sunday evenings, and which ones have quiet emergencies they'd never report directly but signal through small maintenance requests that aren't really about maintenance. A woman on the 4th floor once filed 6 consecutive work orders about her bathroom faucet drip. Each one within 48 hours of a noise complaint from her neighbor, each one resolved, each one refiled. I reassigned her parking spot so she didn't have to walk past his door every morning. The work order stopped. I say this because I want you to understand what kind of person I am. I pay attention, I notice patterns, I connect things that seem unrelated until they aren't. I did not connect the things happening in my own family for a very long time. Not because I wasn't paying attention, because I was paying attention to the wrong building. My mother, Mara Calloway, is 64 years old. She grew up in a small town outside Columbus, married my father at 22, moved into the Crestwood when I was 3 years old and never left. She has lived in this building for 33 years. Longer than I have managed it. Longer than most tenants have been alive. She knows every neighbor by name. She organizes the Christmas card exchange in December, and the building garden plot in spring, and the informal coffee group that meets in the lobby on Wednesday mornings. She is in this building an institution. She is warm in the way that certain people are warm, genuinely, but selectively. The warmth has edges you only find when you press against them. Most people never press. Most people receive the casseroles and the birthday remembrances and the careful inquiries about their children, and they feel seen. And they are grateful, and they never notice that the warmth has a direction. The warmth flows toward Derek. My brother Derek is 31 years old, 5 years younger than me, and he has been the sun in my mother's sky for as long as I can remember. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it the way you state a weather pattern. It simply is the climate. Derek is charming and funny and unreliable in the specific way of people who have never been required to be reliable, because someone else always absorbed the consequences. He works in sales, a different company every 2 or 3 years, always with a good explanation for why the last one didn't work out. He has a son named Marcus, 7 years old, bright and energetic and dressed whenever I see him, in clothes my mother has bought. My mother bought Marcus a winter coat last November, a good one, the kind with the removable lining and the waterproof shell. She showed me a photo on her phone, proudly. Lily's coat that winter was one I'd found at a consignment sale in September. I had not mentioned this to my mother. She had not asked. Derek and his wife, Simone, lived, until 8 months ago, in an apartment on the west side of Columbus. I say until 8 months ago because 8 months ago they moved. I found out not from my mother, not from Derek, but from a change of address notification that crossed my desk because the new address Derek listed for his emergency contact update was Unit 8C, my mother's apartment. My name on the deed. I noted it, I filed it, I told myself it was temporary. I was 36 years old and still telling myself things were temporary that had stopped being temporary years ago. And my father, Robert Calloway, died 11 years ago. A Tuesday in February, fast and without warning, the kind of death that arrives like a administrative error, something that can't possibly be right and yet is. He was 58. He had been a high school history teacher for 30 years, and he died on a Tuesday in February, and I have never fully reorganized the world around that absence. He left the apartment to me not because he loved me more. I want to be clear about that. He left it to me because he understood something about how families work that I was still learning. He had watched for 30 years the way my mother's love flowed. Toward Derek, toward ease, toward the path of least friction. He had loved her anyway, genuinely, without resentment, the way some people love imperfect things. But he had also, quietly, made provisions. You're the responsible one, Mara. You always have been. I understood later that he meant it as more than a compliment. He meant it as protection. What he could not protect me from was my own willingness to let things slide, my own need to be the low-maintenance daughter, my own decade of absorbing things I should have named. That ends here. The money I gave this family, not as a list, as a sequence of moments, because that's what it actually was. The first time was so small, it barely registered. 8 years ago, Derek needed first and last month's rent for a new apartment. He'd lost his job 3 weeks before the lease was due. A situation he described as a miscommunication with management that I later understood meant he'd stopped showing up on time and been let go. He called me on a Wednesday night, casual, almost cheerful, the way he calls when he's already decided the answer is yes and is just doing the paperwork. It's just 2 months, Mara. I'll pay you back before Christmas. $2,400. Before Christmas came and went without mention of it. When I brought it up in January, he said he'd been tight from the holidays. My mother, present for this conversation, said, "Mara, he's trying his best." I absorbed it. I filed it under family. Year 3, Derek's car. Transmission failure. Repair estimate $1,400. No savings to cover it. Could I put it on my card just temporarily, just until his bonus landed? The bonus landed. The $1,400 did not find its way back to my card. When I mentioned it 6 months later, Derek said he thought we'd settled that. My mother said, "Why do you have to keep track of everything?" Why do you have to keep track of everything? I have thought about that sentence many times since. It is, I understand now, the central operating principle of a certain kind of family dynamic, the one where the person being taken from is made to feel that noticing the taking is the problem. Year 6, Marcus's medical bill. Derek and Simone's insurance had lapsed. A gap of 3 weeks, bad timing, a pediatric urgent care visit that cost $640. My mother called me. She didn't ask. She stated, "Derek needs help with Marcus's doctor bill. You can manage that, can't you?" I managed it. Year 8. This one I want to be specific about, because this is the one that changed the texture of my understanding, even though I didn't act on it then. Lily's school had a spring trip. 4 days, 3 nights, science camp in southeastern Ohio. The kind of trip that changes something in a kid, that gives them a reference point they carry forward. The cost, $380. I was between pay periods, tight in the way that single mothers with one income are tight when an unexpected expense lands in the wrong week. I mentioned it to my mother, not asking, just mentioning the way you mention things to family. She said, "That seems like a lot for a school trip." 2 weeks later, she told me she'd bought Marcus a new tablet for his birthday. She showed me the box. $560. I didn't say anything. I worked an extra Saturday and paid for the trip myself. Total, across 8 years, $4,640 in direct loans never repaid, and an accounting of smaller things. Groceries I bought for Sunday dinners, repairs I expedited in Derek's apartment without charging labor, forms I filed, calls I made, that I stopped trying to total because the number wasn't the point. The point was the tablet. The point was the coat. The point was the scholarship form my mother didn't have time to sign. The point was Lily stars in the corners of things and what it would mean to her to get into that program, and the one page my mother couldn't find time for. That's what the complaint landed on top of. Not an empty desk, a full one. So, I want to tell you exactly what I did the moment I read the complaint. Not what I felt, what I did. I turned it face down. I finished the water pressure report. I responded to the parking lot lighting request from 3D. I ate lunch at my desk. A sandwich I'd made at 6 a.m., slightly stale by noon, the kind of meal you eat when eating is just a system maintenance task. I answered 3 emails. I scheduled a boiler inspection for the following week. Then at 2:17 p.m., I turned the complaint face up again. I read it a third time. Slowly. The way I read maintenance reports when something doesn't add up. Looking not just at what it says, but at what it implies. What it assumes, what it requires me to verify. The complaint had been filed by the Homeowners Association Board, specifically by the board secretary, a retired woman named Frances Okafor in Unit 11B, who I had known for 4 years and who kept meticulous records of everything because she had been a court reporter for 31 years and the habit had never left her. Frances Okafor. I set the complaint down. I picked up my phone. I called Frances. She answered on the second ring. "Mara," she said, "I wondered when you'd call. Tell me what you know, I said. She told me. Methodically, chronologically, the way a court reporter tells things, in sequence, without editorializing, letting the facts carry the weight. 22 months ago, she had noticed unfamiliar faces using the 8th floor elevator with small rolling suitcases, the specific luggage of short-term guests, not residents. Initially, she'd assumed they were visiting family, but the pattern continued. Different faces, different suitcases, same floor, every few days, sometimes twice a week. 6 months in, she'd checked the listing herself. She knew how. Her granddaughter had shown her. Unit 8C, she said, listed as Cozy Columbus Retreat, Super Host Badge, 4.9 stars, $86 a night on weekdays, $112 on weekends. I wrote down the numbers. My handwriting was very even. I noticed that how even my handwriting was. How many reviews, I asked. When I checked last week, 112? 112 stays. Roughly 2 years. I did the math on the back of the water pressure report while Frances was still talking. At $86 average per night, 2-night average stay, somewhere between $17,000 and $22,000 across 22 months. My name on the deed, not a dollar of it disclosed to me. Not a dollar of it reported to the building, which, per the Crestwood lease agreement and Ohio short-term rental statute, required owner authorization and a percentage-based facility fee for any rental activity. Frances said, I didn't want to file the complaint, Mara. I want you to know that. I held it for 4 months, but the board was getting pressure from 3 other units about noise and turnover in the hallway, and I had a legal obligation. You did the right thing, I said, thank you, Frances. I ended the call. I opened my building management system. I pulled the access log for Unit 8C, every keycard scan, every entry, every system interaction for the past 24 months. My mother had a physical key. It didn't register in the system, but the building's front door did, a fob-based entry system installed in the 2014 renovation. Every fob had a unique ID. Every scan was logged. My mother's fob, 847 entries over 22 months. Normal. She lived there. A second fob, ID 0091, issued 3 years ago for short-term guest access, a category that required owner authorization, which I had never provided, had been scanned 214 times. Fob 0091. I pulled the issuance record. The authorization form had my name on it, my signature. I looked at my signature on that form for a long time. Then I opened my personnel file and found the signature page from my employment contract. My actual signature, the one I put on documents I actually sign. They were not the same signature. Not close. Not a distorted version. A different signature entirely, written by someone who had seen my name, but not my handwriting. I photographed both documents, side by side, timestamp 3:44 p.m. Tuesday. I created a folder on my desktop. I named it The Building. I spent 6 weeks building the building, not frantically, methodically. Every shift, every day, I managed the building the way I always managed it. Tenant calls, maintenance requests, the Tuesday board check-in, the monthly utility reconciliation. I smiled at my mother in the lobby on Wednesday mornings when she was at her coffee group. I brought Lily to Sunday dinner twice. I watched my mother cut the larger piece of cake for Marcus without noticing she'd done it. The way you do things you've done, so many times they've stopped requiring thought. I said nothing. But every evening, after Lily was asleep, I added to the building. The listing. I found it in 40 seconds. Cozy Columbus Retreat, Unit 8C, Crestwood Residences. Screenshotted every page. The listing photos. My mother's apartment, freshly staged. Throw pillows I'd never seen before on the couch. A small welcome basket on the kitchen counter. 112 reviews. Superhost badge. Host name, Carol C. I read every review. Most were routine. Clean, convenient, responsive host. But 17 of them mentioned the host by name. Not Carol, Derek. He had handled check-ins. He had left the welcome basket. He had responded to the messages. My brother had been running the operation. My mother had provided the apartment. Her name on the listing, his hands on the work, my name on the deed, the financial records. The platform pays out to a linked bank account. I couldn't access that account. It wasn't mine. But I could access the building's utility records, which showed that Unit 8C had consumed 34% more electricity over the past 22 months than the previous 2 years, consistent with higher occupancy, more frequent appliance use, the specific consumption pattern of a unit being actively rented rather than lived in by one person. I documented it column by column, month by month. The fob log. 214 scans of fob 0091 across 22 months. I cross-referenced them against the listing's review dates, guests mentioning check-in, mentioning the host, mentioning specific nights. 14 reviews contained enough date detail to cross-reference directly. 14 matches, 14 confirmed stays, 14 timestamps connecting the fob to the listing to the revenue. I added them to the building. The signature. I sent photographs of both documents, the fob authorization form and my employment contract, to a document examiner, not a forensic lab, not yet. A retired forensics consultant named Gerald Park, who had consulted on 2 previous building compliance cases I'd handled, who owed me a professional courtesy and who called me back in 48 hours. These were not signed by the same person, he said. The baseline, the pressure pattern, the letter formation, completely different. Whoever signed the authorization form was approximating a signature they'd seen, not reproducing one they'd made. Could you put that in writing? I asked. Give me until Friday, he said. His written assessment went into the building on Friday at 4:15 p.m. I asked Frances Okafor if she had kept her own records. She had. Of course she had. 31 years of court reporting does not produce a person who throws things away. She had a notebook, an actual paper notebook, blue cover, her name on the front, with dates, observations, fob numbers she'd noted from the lobby display, names of guests she'd spoken to briefly when they'd asked for elevator directions. She gave me a photocopy, every page. It went into the building. And week 4, I did something I want to tell you about because it's the part of the story that people don't expect. I called my father's old attorney, not for advice about the forgery, for something my father had mentioned once, years ago. In a conversation I had filed away under things I didn't fully understand at the time. He had said, when he put the apartment in my name, that there was also something else, a secondary document, a backup, something he'd set up just in case things got complicated. I had not known what he meant. I had not asked. I was 25 and my father had just died, and I was not asking follow-up questions about estate paperwork. The attorney's name was Leonard Marsh. No relation to anyone in this story, just a man named Marsh who had handled my father's affairs and who was now 73 and semi-retired and reached, after 2 phone calls, at his home on a Thursday evening. I reminded him who I was. I told him I had a question about my father's estate documents. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mara, I was wondering when you'd call. Your father said you would. Eventually." I sat down. "What did he leave?" I asked. Leonard Marsh told me about the second document. Not a will. The will had been straightforward. Everything already handled. This was a separate instrument set up 2 years before my father died, when he had apparently understood something about his health that he hadn't told anyone yet. A revocable living trust. The apartment was in my name. That part I knew, but there was also a separate trust asset, a savings account opened in 1999, added to consistently for 22 years, now holding. Leonard Marsh gave me the number carefully, the way careful people give numbers. $114,000. The trust named me as sole beneficiary. My mother did not know it existed. Derek did not know it existed. My father had been saving for 22 years against the day his daughter might need something that couldn't be absorbed. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call. The apartment was quiet. Lily was asleep. The building hummed around me the way it always does at night. The HVAC, the elevators, the specific sound of 47 families at rest. I thought about my father sitting at the kitchen table 11 years ago, handing me the deed, saying, "You're the responsible one." I thought about the things he must have seen over 30 years of marriage that he absorbed without naming. The way certain kinds of love require you to document against the future. I added the trust documents to the building. Then I called Leonard Marsh back and told him I was ready to activate the trust. The Crestwood annual homeowners meeting was the last Thursday of April. It happened every year. All 47 unit owners or their representatives, the board, the building management, the building's attorney, compliance reports, budget review, maintenance updates. The kind of meeting most people attend out of obligation and leave within 90 minutes. This year, the agenda had one additional item, added by the board at Francis Okafor's request. Unauthorized short-term rental activity. Unit 8C discussion and resolution. My mother did not know I had been building the building for 6 weeks. She knew about the complaint. Francis had sent the formal notice to all unit owners as required, which meant a copy had gone to 8C. My mother had called me when she received it. Her voice on the phone. Light, slightly annoyed. The voice she used for inconveniences. Mara, there's some complaint about my apartment. Something about the rental. Can you just handle it? You know how these board things work. I'll take care of it, I said. She thanked me and moved on to asking whether I was bringing Lily to Sunday dinner. I said yes, I brought Lily to Sunday dinner that week and the week after. I watched my mother cut Marcus the larger piece of cake both times. I said nothing. The meeting was at 7 p.m. in the Crestwood community room, the same room where my mother ran the Christmas card exchange every December. Round tables, folding chairs, a projector screen that the building used for budget presentations. 41 of the 47 owners attended. Francis Okafor sat at the board table in the front. Leonard Marsh, I had asked him to attend, and he had agreed because he was 73 and semi-retired, and I think because my father had asked something of him long ago that this evening would fulfill. My mother arrived at 6:52 with Derek beside her. He was wearing a blue jacket. He looked relaxed. He had not, as far as I could tell, prepared for anything. That's the thing about people who have always been caught by someone else. They stop preparing for the ground to move. I was already in the room. I had set up the projector laptop, my laptop as building manager, which nobody questioned because setting up the projector was part of my job. I had a folder open. The building, organized by section, clearly labeled. My mother saw me and smiled. She took a seat 3 rows from the front. Derek sat beside her. I nodded at them and went back to the laptop. Its meeting opened with the budget review. 15 minutes. I listened and took notes and answered 2 questions about the elevator maintenance schedule. Normal, routine. The 47 families settling into their chairs, checking phones, waiting for the meeting to move quickly so they could get back to their evenings. Then Francis Okafor said, Item 5, Unit 8C. I'll turn this over to our building manager. I stood up. I want to describe the room at that moment. 41 people in folding chairs. The projector light on the white screen. My mother in the 3rd row with her reading glasses pushed up on her head the way she wears them when she's not expecting to need them. Derek with his phone face down on his knee, Frances with her blue notebook open, Leonard Marsh in the back corner, very still, very quiet. I pressed the key and the first slide appeared. Unit 8C, Crestwood Residences, Short-Term Rental Activity Report, Building Management Office. 22 months ago, so I said, Unit 8C was listed on a short-term rental platform without owner authorization, without building disclosure, and without the facility fee required under the Crestwood lease agreement and Ohio Statute 5.3.2.1.06. My voice in that room was even, not loud, not shaking. The voice I use when I'm presenting findings to the board. Factual, sequential, calm. The listing generated 112 confirmed guest stays over 22 months. Based on published nightly rates and average stay duration, gross revenue is estimated between $19,000 and $24,000. I clicked to the next slide. The listing. Cozy Columbus Retreat. Host name, Carol C. Superhost badge, 4.9 stars. My mother made a sound. Not words, just a sound. The specific sound of someone who has just watched the ground shift and hasn't decided yet whether to pretend it hasn't. Derek said, Mara, the FOB authorization form, I said, clicking to the next slide, bears a signature submitted as mine. This is that signature. I clicked to the next slide. This is my actual signature from my employment contract. Side by side, the two signatures, different baselines, different pressure patterns, different letter formation. Anyone in the room with eyes could see it. Someone in the back said, "Oh, just that. Oh." Derek stood up. "This is a family matter," he said. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the thing underneath it. The particular panic of someone who has believed until this moment that the safety net was still there. "This doesn't need to be." "It was filed as a formal building compliance complaint," I said. "It's a building matter." Mara, my mother's voice now, the managing voice, the one she used when she needed to redirect a situation. "Let's not do this here. We can talk at home. The building's attorney is present," I said. I gestured toward Leonard Marsh in the back corner. "He's here regarding a secondary matter connected to Unit 8C that affects the building's ownership records. Leonard?" Leonard Marsh stood. 73 years old, gray suit, the unhurried manner of a man who has been in many rooms and understood that patience is its own authority. He introduced himself. He explained briefly and precisely that the trust governing Unit 8AC, a trust established by Robert Calloway in 2003, naming Mara Calloway as sole beneficiary and trustee, had been activated, effective 30 days prior. That any rental activity conducted on the property during the trust's dormant period without trustee authorization constituted unauthorized use of trust assets. That the estimated rental income of $19,000 to $24,000 generated under a forged authorization document would be the subject of a formal demand letter. He set a document on the table. The demand letter, 2 copies, one for my mother, one for Derek. My mother looked at the document. Then she looked at me. Her face, in that moment, I want to be honest about this because honesty is what this story is about. Her face was not the face of someone caught in a crime. It was the face of someone who had genuinely not considered, at any point in 22 months, that I would ever find out. Not because she thought she was careful, because she had spent 36 years calibrating me as someone who handled things and said nothing. She had miscalculated what I would handle. "This is your father's money," she said, quietly. "He would not have wanted..." "He left it to me," I said. "He wanted exactly this." Derek said something. I don't remember what. It wasn't a sentence that required a response. It was the kind of thing people say when they're looking for a door and there isn't one. I looked at Frances Okafor. She gave me a small nod. I closed the laptop. I picked up my key ring. 47 keys, the weight of them familiar in my hand. I set one key on the table in front of my mother. The key to Unit 8C, the spare I kept in my office. The building management office will need 30 days notice before any future rental activity, I said. "That's per the lease agreement. You have a copy." I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. Leonard Marsh followed me out. We stood in the hallway outside the community room for a moment, the sound of the meeting resuming behind the closed door, the board secretary calling order, someone asking a procedural question. Leonard said, "Your father would be pleased." I thought about that. "He was always paying attention," I said. "So were you," Leonard said. "You just needed time to use it." Have you ever been the one who held the keys for everyone else and found out someone had made a copy of yours? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Yeah. The demand letter was for $21,400, the midpoint estimate of rental income across 22 months, plus the building facility fee that should have been paid, plus Gerald Park's consultation fee, which I had paid out of pocket and which I was not going to absorb. $21,400. Derek and my mother negotiated through Leonard Marsh over 8 weeks. I did not speak to either of them directly during that time, not because I was angry, I want to be precise about this, but because there was nothing left to negotiate in person. Everything that needed to be said had been said in a community room in front of 41 people. Everything else was paperwork, and paperwork I understood. The settlement, $18,000, paid in 2 installments. The first arrived in June, the second in August, both on time. I noted that. The listing was taken down the morning after the meeting. I know because I checked. The superhost badge disappeared with it. Lily got into the arts program, not because of the scholarship application. The deadline for that had passed. She got in on the standard application, which she filled out herself at the kitchen table one Saturday morning in May, printing her name at the top in the careful block letters she uses for important documents, drawing a small star in the upper right corner of the page. She always draws that. She says it so whoever reads it knows it matters. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday. She read it twice, set it on the counter, and then picked up her pencil and drew a star on the envelope. I photographed that envelope. It's the lock screen on my phone. So, my mother and I have not resumed Sunday dinners. Not yet. Maybe eventually. I hold that as a possibility without a timeline, which is the most honest thing I can say about it. She called me in July. Not about the settlement, not about Derek, not about the meeting. She called to tell me that the hydrangeas in the building garden plot were coming in blue this year, which they hadn't in a long time, and that my father had always liked the blue ones. I said I remembered. She said, he used to say you were like him, quiet until you weren't. I didn't say anything. She said, I'm sorry about the form, Lily's form. I should have signed it. It was 11 words. It was also the first time in 36 years that my mother had apologized to me for something specific. Not a general, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not a redirected, let's move forward, but a specific thing. Named. Owned. I said, yeah, she got it anyway. My mother said, of course she did. She has stars on everything. We talked for a few more minutes about the hydrangeas, about Lily's program starting in September, about the boiler inspection I had scheduled for October, which my mother thought was early, but which I explained was not. We hung up. I sat with the call for a while. It wasn't resolution. I want to be honest about that. It was the beginning of something that might become resolution, and it might not, and I've decided to stop predicting which. I still manage the Crestwood, 47 keys. I know every one of them by touch. 4B still sticks in winter. 12A still needs the half turn. The master for the utility corridor still has the notch I filed 3 years ago. Fob 0091 has been deactivated. I logged it out of the system on the morning after the meeting at 7:03 a.m. before the building woke up. The log shows access credential 0091, deactivated by building manager. Reason, unauthorized issuance. One line, clean the building's record of what happened. I have the spare key to 8C in my desk drawer now. Not my office desk, my desk at home. The one Lily uses for homework sometimes. The one with the star stickers she put on the legs when she was 6. I set the key there the night after the meeting, and I haven't moved it. It's not a symbolic gesture. I'm not that kind of person. It's just the key to my apartment in my desk, where it belongs. Harold Voss told me when he handed me his key ring on his last day, the building will tell you everything you need to know. You just have to listen. He was talking about the building. He was also not just talking about the building. I know that now. I've been listening. Yeah. If you're still here, wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for staying with Mara. These stories matter because you matter. Subscribe if this one found you when you needed it. And leave a comment. I'll be reading 47 keys. I knew every one of them. It took me longer to learn the one I should have been holding all along. Jan.